Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first Abriso Jiffy webinar. The main goal of this webinar is to understand the new European legislative landscape, in specific, the recycled content in packaging. First, some practical information. Everybody is muted, and it's normal that you can only see the presenters. This to prevent disruption and/or distraction during the meeting, but also to guarantee the privacy of everybody. The chat is disabled, but there's also a possibility to ask questions in the Q&A section. These questions will first be gathered by us, and at the end of the meeting, we will discuss them within the allocated time slots. If certain questions are not answered yet, due to time constraints or customer privacy, we will contact you personally after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be made available afterwards. Before we dive into the content, allow me to introduce the team of today. My name is Matthias van Hekke, and I work for Abriso Jiffy for about a year and a half now as strategy manager, after about 4 years of experience in strategy consulting. As sustainability is becoming a key part of our strategy, I have broadened my knowledge regarding this topic, and I'm now overseeing the different sustainability projects. I will also be your lead speaker of today. Together with me, my colleague Dries Kuiperen is also present in this webinar. Dries is our quality manager and can be seen as an expert on the topic of recycled content and carbon footprint. He's a vital part in the implementation of everything we do regarding sustainability. And during this webinar, Dries will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. Like I've said, it is possible that bigger or more complex questions will be held to the end of the meeting, where we will take the time during Q&A section. Small questions can be answered personally during the meeting as well. One last practical detail before we dive into the content is that the presentation is based on the version of the PPWR from April 24th, 2024. It is possible that certain details still will change when the official version is published. Therefore, this presentation can be seen as a guidance, but not as legal advice, and every participant needs to assess the relevance of this information to their own circumstances. Now that we have the practical details behind us, we can go over to the content of today. First of all, we will shortly talk about the current sustainability trends in the world. How is the market evolving, and how do big companies or multinational answer to this? This is purely to set the scene a little bit. Secondly, we will talk about the legislative changes. We will discuss the current situation and the presumed to be situation based on the PPWR. Thirdly, we will talk about how we are preparing ourselves to this changing regulation and what we already have today to make your life easier regarding sustainability. And last, as discussed, we will also take the time to answer some of your questions by the end of the session. Specific customer-related questions will not be handled publicly, but rather after the webinar by mail. So let's start. Let's start with the sustainability trends. If you would ask the average person how sustainable plastic or plastic packaging is perceived, I think most of them will recall images they have seen online of a turtle with a straw through its nose or a seal cup who is stuck in plastic cup holders. It's exactly these kinds of images that make people more aware of the environment and boost the power of sustainability. However, plastic is often seen as a bad guy in these images. Our goal is to prove with data that plastics are actually a sustainable alternative when recycled correctly. One of the companies who has taken matters into its own hands regarding sustainability is Coca-Cola. As a big part of their product portfolio consists of plastic bottles, they have focused a lot on sustainability. They have partnered with lots of environmental companies like WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and use sustainability on a lot of their advertisements, creating slogans like refresh, recycle, repeat, and going as far as they advertise, don't drink Coca-Cola if you don't help us recycle. But Coca-Cola is not the only one. I've put 3 more sustainability leaders in the next slide just to show that sustainability goes a lot further than the food and drink industry. Patagonia, for example, is focusing a lot on reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle, going as far as putting ads on their own clothing with the slogan, "Don't buy the sweater," hinting on repairing and reusing old sweaters. When one of your clothing pieces is, for example, ripped, you can send it back to Patagonia and they will fix it to you, as said their slogan, "Repair is the new cool." Nike, on the other hand, is a frontrunner, pun intended, in sustainability as well, continuously improving and looking for new technologies. As can be seen here, they have reduced their emissions by 69% and divert 100% of their footwear waste. And finally, Estée Lauder company is already focusing on sustainability for multiple years, using as much as natural products as possible, even including it in their slogan, beauty inspired, values driven. This, Coca-Cola and the other three multinational companies, just to show you that sustainability is a hot topic in multiple industries and that customers are expecting more sustainable growth and more sustainable solutions. If we look at the sustainable packaging market, American consulting firm Towards Packaging has estimated the expected growth based on multiple parameters. The baseline was taken in 2022, and based on the data until today, they expect the market to grow with a CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, of 6.55% in the coming 10 years, almost doubling the sustainable packaging market size over that time from $260 million to $490 million. Given that the overall packaging market is also increasing with 4%, we see that the sustainable alternatives are winning in share. Furthermore, according to PwC Voice of the Consumer survey, customers are willing to pay on average 9.7% more for sustainable alternatives. This trend will continue as the younger generation is attaching more and more importance to sustainability, and non-sustainable resources are becoming more scarce. This was purely to set the scene a little bit. I think we all understand the importance of sustainability and sustainable alternatives. This is also why there are legislations being made regarding this topic. However, these legislations can be administrative nightmares, which is why I'm going to highlight the most important parts in the upcoming slides. Before we go on to what is going to happen, let's first talk about what is already in place. Multiple countries already have certain rules or are drafting them as we speak. 3 countries, however, have already something quite formal at the moment. Starting with Spain. Spain already has a plastic tax since January 2023. This tax fines 45 cents per kg of non-recyclable or non-reusable plastics, with the exemption when going lower than 5 kg. UK, on the other hand, maybe has the most formal and advanced plastic tax in place at the moment, as a minimum of 30% recycled content is needed in plastic products. This is 30% recycled content, no difference between PIR or PCR, which I will come back to later in the slides. If this is not achieved, a fine of approximately £210 is given per ton. Furthermore, there's also a ban on single-use plastics in place. Finally, in Germany, they are also drafting a new legislation that should go in as from January 2025. This legislation will comply with the European Union's Single-Use Plastics Directive, thus setting a ban on single-use plastics. The exact rates of the fines are not finalized yet, but are expected to be between 45 cents, like in Spain, and €1 per kg. However, as you can see, there are a lot of differences between the countries, with multiple countries having nothing formal yet at the moment. That is why the EU has decided to create the PPWR, which stands for Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. This is a formal replacement of the Packaging Directive, issued in 1994 already and turning 30 years old this year. It's also part of the broader Circular Economy Action Plan. A common misconception is that PPWR stands for Plastic Packaging Waste Regulation, which is not true. Every type of packaging, as you can see in the slide, glass, paper, metal, and plastics are all part of the PPWR. We are, of course, going to focus on plastics, as we are a plastic company, which is a big part of the PPWR. But before we do that, we are going to zoom in for a little bit on paper, often seen as the sustainable alternative for plastics. However, in a lot of aspects, plastics should not be perceived worse than paper. If you look at the carbon footprint, for example, we can see that the protective plastics is more advantageous compared to paper alternatives. Further, in this webinar, we are going to show some exact numbers to back this. Secondly, according to a Ghent University study, plastics can be recycled indefinitely without losing their characteristics, whereas paper can only be reused 7 times. A very important factor is the forest conservation. 60% of the trees that are cut annually are used in paper production. This is a lot. And this will also become increasingly more difficult with the new deforestation regulation that enters at the end of 2025. Another factor is the energy efficiency. where the manufacturing process of plastics is more energy efficient compared to paper production. And lastly, but not least, according to the same university study of University of Ghent, plastic production requires 17 times less water than paper production, another important environmental factor. But back to why we are here, back to plastics. There are 5 big changes, 5 big topics that can be singled out if you look deeper at the PPWR. First of all, as from 2030 onwards, the EU market will only be accessible for recyclable packaging. Products must be designed so that they are easy to collect, to sort, and to be recycled. The second change, and perhaps the most disrupting change of all, is a minimal percentage of recycled content in plastic packaging across the EU by 2030. The same situation as for the UK can be expected, that when the needed percentage is not reached, certain fines and extra administration will be issued. By setting this minimum recycled content percentage, companies will be driven to use more recyclable and biodegradable materials into packaging products. Thirdly, the new regulation encourages reuse systems for packaging while promoting the use of refillable packaging. By driving reuse and refill, the new regulation reduces single-use packaging and promotes alternatives wherever possible. Another important change in the new regulation is the waste minimization, where packaging waste needs to be reduced based on their weight, therefore proposing to ban unnecessary packaging, including many single-use plastics again. And the fifth and final change is maybe the most important one. This new PPWR means that there is a harmonized set of rules across the EU instead of every country having their own directive, which, by the way, is not 100% enforceable. The regulation will be enforceable. Furthermore, there will be also harmonized labeling on packaging and waste collection as well. I have lied a little bit. I have said there are only 5 big changes. This is actually a 6th topic as well. And this topic focuses on the EPR, the extended producer responsibility. This means that manufacturers and producers take on more responsibility for the entire life cycle of the packaging created by them. We are now going to zoom in a little bit more on the 2 topics in blue, in light blue, the minimum recycled content and the waste minimization. First of all, it needs to be mentioned that the recycled content will have to be PCR by 2030. PCR stands for post-consumer recycled. There can also be found many definitions on the internet, but the easiest to understand is that PCR is made from waste that has served its purpose for the customer. PIR, on the other hand, which stands for post-industrial recycled, is waste that is being made in the production process and has not yet reached the customer. At the moment in the UK, it doesn't matter if it is PIR or PCR, but like I've said, in the future, in the PPWR, it will have to be PCR. Taking this into account, there are 4 product groups with their own minimum recycled content percentages or needs. For the single-use beverage bottles, 30% recycled content is obligated by 2030 and 65% will be obligated by 2040. For PET contact sensitive, 30% is needed by 2030 and 50% by 2040. For other contact sensitive plastics, 10% is needed by 2030 and 25% is needed by 2040. FYI, contact sensitive includes food, animal feed, and cosmetic products. Whatever is not included yet in one of these categories, like most plastic protective packaging products, needs to have 35% recycled content by 2030 and 65% PCR by 2040. How we, as a company, plan to tackle this will be made clear in the 3rd part of this webinar. If you zoom in on waste minimization, we always need to start from the 3R principle: reduce, reuse, recycle. Internally in Abriso Jiffy, we have also our own 3R files in the different plants with the goal of reducing our internal waste stream as well. I have purposely chosen this picture because we can see at the moment there is a lot of waste that is not being recycled correctly. The goal of the PPWR is to make it recyclable, to recycle it correctly, and to minimize this as much as possible so we can transition from the left side of the slide into the right side of the slide where we have a green alternative. To achieve the needed waste minimization, a baseline in 2018 is taken. When looking at the weight of the waste per capita in 2018, there needs to be a reduction of 5% by 2030, 10% by 2035, and 15% by 2040. If we go to the timeline, we can see different kind of milestones in the upcoming years. When there is a big circle, this means that this date is already fixed in time. When there's a smaller circle, this means that this milestone is to be expected for this period. It is not written in stone yet and can be on a later time period as well. First of all, if you look at the past, in Q2, in April Q2, the PPWR was politically agreed. By the end of this year, it will be published officially, and there is expected to be an implementation period of 18 months, which means that by mid-2026, the PPWR will apply across the EU. Furthermore, in the same period, PFAS will also be banned in food packaging. By the end of 2026, there will also be a set of rules made available on how to accurately calculate the PCR level, together with a set of criteria for recycling and minimum rotations for reusable packaging. In 2027, an evaluation and possible proposal regarding bio-based plastics is to be expected, while in 2028, the rules to measure reuse and refill are expected to be adopted, together with the DFR, or the Design for Recycling rules. Fast forward to 2030, and we have our biggest milestone yet, the one with the most impact. By 2030, all packaging needs to be designed for recycling and needs to be reduced 5% by weight. Further, the minimum amount of PCR content becomes obligated, and there will be single-use plastic bans in place. There's also to be expected a first evaluation of these new rules in 2031-2032. If we still look a little bit further into the future, we expect an evaluation of the need for recycled content in other materials than plastic in 2033. In 2035, all packaging must be recycled at scale. The exemptions of DFR, Design for Recycling, will be reviewed, and there is the next step in weight reduction, 10% compared to 2018. In 2038, there will be stricter design requirements for all packaging, while in 2040, the next step in the recycled content story and weight reduction, 15% compared to 2018, will start. This is also a big milestone again. This was a lot to take in, I know that, and we understand that this is rather complex. This is exactly why we are anticipating your changing needs and are focusing a lot on sustainability and sustainable solutions that adhere to these upcoming regulations. Before we go on to what is new in our portfolio, let's first review what is already known at the moment. First and foremost, we have our Ocean Green portfolio. I guess it's already rather well known with the general audience, but in short, our Ocean Green profiles are made out of 100% recycled LDPE, with some exceptions that are being made with 30%. More on that later. Our Ocean Green bubble is made from at least 70% LDPE that is being recycled. If we look at our technical foams, our renewed technical foams are first of all 100% recyclable, which is one of the 5 changes according to PPWR, designed for recycling, but are also made out of at least 80% recycled content. We have already spoken about 3R this webinar: reduce, reuse, recycle, but there's also another R that is very important in our processes. This is rethink. If we look at the R's, for our renew foam, 100% of production waste is reused. Closed loop processes reduce virgin material use, and we rethink our current processes by developing new technologies to limit any environmental impact. This is, by the way, not only the case for Renew, also Ocean Green follows the multiple R principle. If we look at the sustainability strategy we are following, we can divide our product groups into 2 categories. First of all, we have the category focused at the customers who aim to comply with the legislation compliers, avoiding plastic tax and administrative burdens. The second category focuses on the sustainability leaders, the group of customers where sustainability is a USP and who want the maximum amount of recycled content in their products. If we look at what we had yesterday as a figure of speech, then we see that we had our Ocean Green and our Renew portfolio, aimed both at the sustainability leaders only. We see that every product has between 70% Ocean Green and 100% Ocean Green profiles recycled content in it, or RC70 until RC100. What we are creating today is the opportunity to also go for a recycled content percentage of 30, RC30, to adhere to the current legislation in, for example, the UK, and to be a stepping stone to the upcoming PPWR in 2030, where recycled content percentage of 35% is needed. Because that's what we are aiming for in the near future by 2030, a sustainability category of 35%, RC35 for the legislation compliers, and a maximum amount of recycled content for sustainability leaders. That's why it's not defined yet. It's RCXX at the moment. We want to go as high as possible and want to see what is technically feasible. It is possible that it stays at 70, but when we can go higher, it can be 75, it can be 80. We don't know what the future brings, but we want to go as high as possible. If we look into more detail at our different product groups in packaging, we see that for bubble, we have an RC30 and RC70 at the moment. RC70, of course, our ocean green bubble is RC70. For foam, it is not yet technically feasible to put a lot of recycled content into our products, but we already offered RC30 for certain thicknesses onwards. We are, of course, looking into new technologies, rethinking, again, the R of rethink, our production and recycling processes. Our ocean green profiles have 100% recycled LDPE, which is RC100. There are, however, some exceptions based on form or size of the profiles where it's not possible to have 100%. Here we want to be transparent to you guys, and they will be called RC30, Ocean Green RC30, still adhering to the current UK plastic tax, or RC0 if we cannot reach the 30%. But like I've said, these are only exceptions. The lion's share of our product portfolio in profiles is perfectly possible in RC100. Finally, our technical foam, Polylam and Nopa plank, as already mentioned, we can reach a level of 80% recycled content, making it an RC80. By extension, an RC30 is also possible to adhere to current plastic taxes in, for example, the UK. I can understand that this just sounds like a nice selling story, which in fairness, it is a nice selling story, but it's not only a selling story. We are working with a fact-based approach where we can prove that we practice what we preach. We are partnering with external firms to, on the one hand, calculate our carbon footprint in our different production locations. Based on these results, we are making up plans and strategies to lower this by 2030 as well, to set our own internal milestones. But on the other hand, we are also partnering up to receive certificates for our recycled content. These certificates are based on a product group level and are based on the European norm 15343, issued in 2007, which focuses a lot on the traceability of the recycled content, and the European norm 14021, issued in 2016, which focuses on the current use on the correct use of terms and definitions. These certificates are on a plant level. This means that the capabilities of each plant are being looked at. For example, if Amsterdam cannot make a RC70 bubble, but Wellen, for example, can, then only on certificate of Wellen will it say RC70 bubble, while in Amsterdam it will say only RC30 bubble or nothing at all. We want to be as transparent as possible to you guys. At the moment, all of our Western European plants are certified with Polycert already, with the remaining plants planned before the end of the year. The company-wide use of Polycert also guarantees that everywhere you buy a certain sustainable product, you will receive the exact same product with the amount of recycled content that we promised. Some of our plants also have Recyclass certifications. I'm thinking about our Polish plant in Olcina. This is based on specific historical needs and choices, but at the moment we are focusing on Polycert company-wide so that every plant in our company has a Polycert certification on top of some plants also have Recyclass certifications. A lot of people are saying that there is need for alternatives for plastic, but as we have seen in the beginning of this webinar, there is no alternative. Or better said, there is no alternative that outshines the sustainable properties of recycled plastic. We have done the test ourselves. We have put ourselves in a scenario that each and every one of you have already thought about and personally keeps me up at night. What if I have to move the Mona Lisa? Of course, you would start with protecting the corners. You have to choose between cardboard corners or ocean green profiles. If you look at the quantitative characteristic, we can see that 4 ocean green profiles for the 4 corners have a carbon footprint 9 to 10 times lower than recycled cardboard. Moreover, If you look at the raw materials, profiles use use 70%, 75% less raw materials than cardboard. If you look at the qualitative changes and characteristics, we can see that using plastic profiles prevents deforestation, as we have seen already, and it also protects your products against humid conditions where cardboard turns to mush. It also has a significant weight reduction. Remember that this was one of the topics in the PPWR. But again, like I have said, we like to work with a fact-based approach, which is why, based on multiple samples to be statistically correct, we have compared paper products in the public opinion the sustainable solution with our sustainable product portfolio. I know it's rather small on the slide, so I will summarize it a little bit. If you look at bubble on the top left, our recycled LDP bubble wrap, ocean green, has a carbon footprint of twice as low compared to recycled cardboard with the same properties, 13 versus 27 grams CO2 per product. Furthermore, it weighs exactly 3 times as less, 35 grams per square meter compared to 105 grams per square meter, again favoring the change in the PPWR of weight reduction. Even our virgin LDP bubble wrap has better or equal sustainability properties at the moment. We already talked about profiles on the previous slide, but I have put them down again here on the bottom. Both the weight and carbon footprint are significantly lower than cardboard, corner, and edge protectors. 1 versus 9.1 and 2 versus 13.4 gram CO2 per product. Finally, if you look at our foams in the top right corner, we can see that our Astrofoam RC30 has a higher carbon footprint at the moment. Again, we want to be transparent, but also has a higher thickness, offering more protection. Our Renew Polylam, on the other hand, has, apart from its higher thickness and protection, also a lower carbon footprint, 31 gram CO2 per product compared to 43 gram CO2 per product. I know it's a lot of data, but we really wanted to show our fact-based approach based on our partnerships and certificates. Before we go to the end, I still want to show that we are at the moment continuously trying to improve regarding sustainability with some projects that are currently being worked on. First of all, apart from our ocean green profiles with a high density and a high percentage of recycled content, we are also creating a separate cloud gray portfolio. This portfolio has a recycled content percentage of 30% and a significantly lower density. This helps the weight reduction on the one hand, but still maintains the needed percentage of recycled content on the other hand. We also have an increased focus on bio-based products, which are based upon 100% natural polymer made from sugarcane residues. And finally, maybe you have seen this picture already on social media with the text, "This wall uses less stones, but is still stronger than a straight wall." This phenomenon is called a serpentine wall, where the waves help its strength. We are looking into similar applications for our foam to see if, based on a wave pattern, we can keep our protective strength while using less materials and therefore decreasing our carbon footprint. The final slide of today, before we go to the Q&A section, is a small summary of what Abriso Jiffy can offer you in terms of sustainability. I'm just going to read through it because everything has already been said. First of all, Abriso Jiffy offers a sustainability portfolio with a category to comply with the changing legislation and to help the customer avoid plastic tax and administrative burdens. At the moment, this is RC30, but this will evolve towards RC35 in the near future. Abriso Jiffy fights greenwashing by providing the needed certificates and proving our recycled content on a product group level for every of our production plants. Plastics, when recycled correctly, are better than paper for the environment, proven by our carbon footprint calculations. And finally, Abriso Jiffy doesn't regard sustainability as a one-off. We continuously keep looking for improvements, however small they are. We are now going to answer some of your questions you had during the webinar. If you still have questions at the moment, don't hesitate to still ask them in the Q&A section. Again, like I've said, the webinar, the recording will be sent to you guys afterwards as well, together with the slides. If your questions are not answered during the Q&A part, we will try to answer it by mail as soon as possible, or afterwards we can come into contact with each other as well. I have put the LinkedIn profiles of myself and Dries, who will answer your questions, on this slide as well. Feel free to connect. And already thank you for your attention. Dries, are there any questions at the moment?
This moment, chat is open, so we are receiving our first question. What are the underlying assumptions of the main argumentation? Could you explain this a little bit more in detail? Does PPWR clearly defines PIR and PCR? Well, this is indeed one of the trick questions that we have. PPWR is only talking about PCR and does not involve PIR. In that way, that PCR in their definition is products that have been put on the market, which is not the case for PIR. So in that way, PPWR is indeed very clear on this. However, at this moment, there is no restriction yet on PIR as well.
Maybe to answer as well, at the moment we do both PIR and PCR, but when the legislation says it has to be PCR from 2030 onwards, of course we are going to shift towards PCR. Dries, maybe the underlying assumptions of the main argumentation for the CO2, are you talking about the products, the specific products that we have spoken about in the slides? Dries, maybe you can go into the bilan carbon method a little bit further about how we calculated our carbon footprint for every product. You are muted, Dries, by the way.
Yes, I was responding to a question. The carbon footprint calculation is based on the greenhouse gas protocol for our company at this moment. For a selected group of plants within the Abriso Jiffy group, the sustainability strategy has been taking a look at scope 1 and scope 2 of the carbon footprint calculation. Scope 1 and 2 is merely your own energy consumption, your own car and fuel that you are using. In 2025, we will start up with scope 3 as well. In scope 3, we will incorporate also our processes, suppliers, material that we are using. So we can have a full carbon footprint calculation according to the greenhouse gas protocol. Another interesting question, which type of recycled content is in the ocean green products, PCR or PIR? We will focus completely on PCR. At this moment, there is no restriction yet to use PIR and PCR. So at this moment, it's a combination of both. However, when the legislation will come in effect of 2030, then we will need to focus completely to 100% PCR. Another question we receive is, why would we wait until 2030 to launch PCR products in line with the PPWR? We will not wait. It's indeed waiting is actually running behind. Continuous development is busy. Same with biodegradable products. We are also incorporating this in the R&D phase. So this is something we are currently investigating as well on technology level, as well on legislation level. We have another question. Why is it so difficult for you to use PCR? Well, PCR is coming from the market, and the level of degradable products and the contamination that you could have from PCR is potentially higher than with PIR. PIR is directly from your production line. You recycle it, you reuse it in another production process. This is very controllable. Other products from other plants, other markets, other suppliers, customers are a little bit less controllable, and that's it, making it more difficult to use PCR. The CO2 carbon footprint calculation cradle to gate of the range of materials. We can already calculate CO2 calculation for a wide product range that we can have, but the main focus of the sustainability strategy for Abriso Jiffy will be developed further in 2025, where we incorporate also scope 3. And that is for the whole Abriso Jiffy group. But for specific customer-related questions, we can already answer you on that level. A question that we also received is, what do you think about chemical recycling? At this moment, this is one of the technology challenges that we will have. We are momentarily mechanically recycling and using the recycled content into our material, but chemical recycling is definitely an option for the future. We also get a question on XPS, one of the portfolios, product portfolio that we have within Abriso Jiffy. This is a customer-related question which will be directed personally. Another question is, how will you think in having enough PCR content for 2030? Well, this is the $1 million question, since all of our competitors, customers, plastic product suppliers, manufacturers will have the same question, actually. And at this moment, our mass balance allows us to produce in 2030 PCR, but when everybody will have the same focus, will be the challenge. Of course, extra to mention is also the waste collection program that we will set up with our customers as well. Another question is, when is recycled material being considered as PCR? Well, from the moment the material has served its end process, its end main function, this is when the material has been considered as PCR. So what the customer, in fact, will do further with the material doesn't matter. It serves its end function. So this is considered as PCR. I think most of the questions have been answered. Also, congratulations to the great presentation, Matthias.
Thank you, Dries. I think we can conclude here. If there are still questions, you will receive a mail after this webinar with my email address in it. You can always send me a mail with your questions and I will come back to you as soon as possible. Again, you can also contact me via LinkedIn. I see it often, so we love to help you further out. I would like to thank you all. I would also like to thank Dries for answering the more technical questions, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you very much.